Welcome to Activations with JJ. This is part 3 of my Ascension Diaries series, and I'm so glad that you decided to join me for this. This has been fun to create, and I hope that much of what I said is resonating with you so far. If you're new to the podcast or the YouTube channel, be sure to check it out. There are several episodes of meditations and light language activations. And again, this is the third in a series about my experiences with Ascension. So be sure to listen to the other two if you have not yet. So today I would like to speak about time and timelines. I think that's probably the best way to describe what I'm going to bring up. And I have a few different stories I'd like to tell, and then just my general observations about what's going on with time. I do truly believe that time is an illusion. Some of this started when I first began my spiritual journey, and I still believed quite strongly in the timeline and in time. The way that I know that I did is because I was seeking to know what I was in past lives and who I was in past lives. And even Dolores Cannon, when she brings up in her QHHT sessions, which she documented in her books, in some of her later works, she acknowledges that they aren't necessarily past lives, but parallel lives. In other words, they are things that our energy has experienced, and it doesn't necessarily mean it happened before. It could have been something in the future to us. But again, if there's no time, then it's all parallel, it's all interwoven. Super fascinating thing to consider. That really helped me to move forward in my spiritual journey because I was so caught up in finding out who I was in my past lives and who I was going to be. When we look at non-duality in its purest form, we realize all things are one. So all time is one, and all things are happening simultaneously. Some of what I'm talking about today gets a little bit mind-blowing. And this quantum physics, quantum mechanics, these types of things, if you want to research them more, there is a lot out there. I highly recommend you just search it on the internet. I don't have necessarily any favorites per se, but I do really enjoy Dolores Cannon just for the perspective of her. She sometimes adds in these little nuggets of wisdom about quantum physics. There again are several people who study that. Bruce Lipton comes to mind. He's another one. I won't list them all right here, but if I can think of any more, I'll add them into the description of the YouTube video so that you can look them up if you're unfamiliar. Also, if you know of any good resources regarding quantum physics, time, all of those things, go ahead and add those into the comments of this video. I really want this to be a collaborative effort for all of us. So I remember reading a story, and this was again a little bit earlier on in my spiritual journey. I was getting into some different people and listening to their videos, and this one woman talked about an experience she had where she and her husband and two friends were needing to get to the airport, and they realized that they were running late. Time had gotten away from them. They were about to travel overseas to speak at a conference, and she remembers they got in the car, they looked at the clock, and they thought, oh, there's no way I'm going to get there. There's just no way. They got in the car, and they traveled to the airport, and we got to the airport. They realized like only 5 minutes had passed, and it was supposed to be a 45-minute trip. Looking back on the drive, they realized they had not seen any other cars anywhere on the roads. And that was very odd to them. And so she was looking at things from definitely a metaphysical perspective on how that occurred. But I really do think that it's just a way that time is bending and a way that we can actually become masters over time. So I believe we can live in that vibration where there is no time, and that higher vibrational, higher density, higher vibrational beings, I'll call it higher vibrational, are able to live above what is created on this planet as time. The reason why time has been created on this planet is for us to experience it. So I don't look down upon it as in you're more ascended if you don't experience time. Because again, I talked about this before. This isn't about going into a certain density and staying there. It's about multidimensionality. It's about experiencing time if we choose to experience time, and then bending time if we choose to bend time. Over the years, I've noticed in Hollywood, which definitely reflects the energies, I feel like those creatives, although there are definitely some lower vibrational things going on in that field, there are many, many people who are tapped into the energy, who are creative, and who are creating shows about time and about the bending of time and the warping of time and how we can travel back and forth. Technically, there are theories that scientists have already figured out how to time travel, and you can also look that up. I think it was during World War II. I'm trying to remember exactly the story that I heard, but that there was a group that actually did travel through time and was able to accomplish that. So again, there's lots of theories out there. I'm just telling you my personal experiences. I've read stories about things happening to people, and as time has gone by, I've actually had those things occur. One of them is this. I'll be driving down the road. I'll be walking down the street, and all of a sudden, I'll see something, a landmark, possibly, that I've never noticed before in that place. And this isn't something like a piece of trash that could come and go. This is like a giant tree, like a big full-grown tree, or a building that I feel like that building was not there before. This has happened to me like 3 or 4 times in the last month or so. I specifically remember my drive to work one day. I was driving through on the freeway and I was passing by, it was more like fields. It wasn't necessarily, it was more of a rural landscape. And I remember seeing a few different landmarks, and I thought, I have not seen those before. And all of a sudden, when I had that realization, I shifted into what I call kind of, it's not a brain fog, but it's a time warp state. And I feel like I'm in a dream. I feel like time is bending, like things are becoming dreamlike. That's the best way for me to explain it. So that's one story that I thought I would share. And that's happened to me again more than one time lately. I definitely feel like that. Another way that I've noticed that, speaking of time, is timelines. So for me, a timeline is you're kind of going along in life with the same group of people in the same place, and you, as long as you're with them and their vibration, you are almost like Velcro to that timeline. Oftentimes when we move or relocate, we shift timelines. I've also had myself shifting timelines when I travel. So when I go a far distance and I really get away from the energy that I was around, I notice that when I get to my destination, I do feel a totally different energy, and I sense that I'm in a different timeline. It could be a different dimension or a different density, but I feel like sometimes it's a different timeline for me, that I kind of shift gears to a different timeline. And then when I go back, I set the intention that I stay in that timeline and that it be for my greatest and highest good. This has happened to me traveling on a road. I've noticed I went through a portal between 2 mountains. So it's basically like a canyon area or a valley. I sense that those areas are very much full of energy, of this energy where you can shift. And I had this experience recently where I was going through this portal just because of my everyday life. I had to go through it to commute. And that I noticed that every time I was going through it, there was some kind of time bending or upgrading going on. I sort of asked just to feel into it. And that's the impression that I got. If you've had experiences like that, please feel free to share them in the show notes. Again, another time that I've felt that is when I have moved. So in the last 10 years, I've moved frequently. And I feel like I've really read the energy of a place, or I've been kind of psychic about it. Just because you're psychic and feel like you could move somewhere else doesn't mean you have to create that. I used to feel like if I was psychic and I saw something, which I do all the time, I get these flashes of things that could happen. I want you to treat them as things that could happen and not things that have to happen. I want to invite you to consider their options. They're not set in stone. When I was on the first part of my spiritual journey, I felt like every spiritual message I got, I had to carry out, or I was a bad person, or I was denying that, right? So I want you to consider that you have free will, that if you have a psychic moment where you see something play before you, maybe you see yourself living in a different area. Those are often times for me, which are time warps, because I just feel like I'm sensing into an energy of a different timeline. And that's all fun and it's okay. But to actually live it out, to actually carry it out, obviously that takes a lot on our end in the physical world to move, simply to move. Lots of people have been drawn to move and have done it. I've personally done it. I'm just saying to you, when you have that impression or that psychic moment, it doesn't mean you have to do it, and it doesn't mean you have to do it in the next 2 weeks. But I have done it, and some very fascinating things have happened to me. I've gotten what I like to call amnesia. I've had so many different jobs, career changes throughout my life, and moves throughout my life. And in those moves and career changes and in those different environments, I've obviously rubbed shoulders with many, many different people. Now with social media, it's easier to remember people, right? We connect with people there and it's easier to recall those people. So I'm going to say a lot of this happened before social media. I really felt it much stronger then. I think social media can, if you don't edit your friends and you don't kind of clean up your friends frequently, you can get stuck in timelines and stuck in their energy when they're in a place you don't want to be. I just want to say that right now. So I think there's a good reason for me having gotten the amnesia. I feel like I've shifted to a different vibration. Now, all of you know that I believe there is no judgment to where a person's vibration is. So I'm not sitting there going, well, I moved to a higher vibration and they're worse than I am because they haven't ascended. That's by no means what I'm trying to say. I literally have just resonated differently than them and naturally been sifted away from their world and their social circles. And so I'll try to remember a timeline I've been in. For instance, like a previous job and who was at that previous job. That's a good example of it. And I cannot, for the life of me, remember very many details. Now, I bet if I went into meditation and I wanted to remember it better, I could. But again, I think that it's for a reason that I've released those timelines, and I do it very, very quickly. Very quickly. It's kind of blown my mind. And I used to worry a lot about it. I really did. But if you're in the same boat that I am and you're shifting a lot, because maybe that's your soul contract. You came here to start out a certain place and then you agreed to shift very quickly. That's why if you look at my energy update for July 12th, 2021, Luna comes in. That's the energy of the moon. And she talks all about change and how about the new earth is going to be about change and shifting all of the time. That's something we need to get used to. I remember also listening to a Cryon message on YouTube. If you haven't heard of Cryon, he's an energy channeled by Lee Carroll. And Cryon said, the energy of the new earth is all about change. And you humans, if you want to be there, you've got to get used to change and you've got to get used to shifting. So again, I do believe that a lot of these experiences that I'm subconsciously creating, my higher self is creating, they are to get me used to being around different environments frequently. And humans are going to become genetically evolved to a point where they're not in fight or flight, that lizard brain, that animal brain that we were primitively at, which would create a lot of fear and adrenaline coming, which causes stress and shortens our lives when change happens. See, they were designed, when a change happened, it meant that there was going to be no food, or that they needed to adapt quickly to their circumstance. And so that's what the animal brain does, is it says, oh, change is bad. Be afraid of change. Try to do everything you possibly can to have consistency in your life. Now that we're shifting our DNA, we don't have to live like that anymore. We can embrace change. We can embrace timeline changes. We can embrace not knowing what time it is, what day it is. We can embrace the fact that something may feel like it took an hour and it only took a minute. Conversely, we can embrace the fact that something that felt like a minute went for an hour. So whenever you're experiencing these, again, we've labeled them, right, in society. That means there's something wrong with your brain. You have a mental illness. It's okay. If you're experiencing this right now, you're most likely a way shower vibrationally. You may never say it out loud. You may never declare your stories to other people in the real physical world. But vibrationally, you're inviting a new species of human being because you're evolving into that. And this new species and these new timelines and these new dimensions and densities are going to be full of change and flow. So thank you so much for joining me for this third part of the Ascension Diaries series. If you have anything that you've experienced that you'd like to share, please do so in the comments. I'm really enjoying hearing from you. That's why I created this series, is so that you could then share with me what you've gone through, and we can all kind of feel validated in these really fascinating times that sometimes make us feel a little weird and a little strange. So please be sure to join me for future episodes of this particular series, Ascension Diaries. And until then, the light in me honors the light in you. Namaste.